You were never supposed to wake me." The voice did not echo through the chamber. It pressed directly into Emily Carter's chest, cold and ancient, as if the air itself had learned how to speak. Her hand was still resting against the edge of the coffin when the lid shifted beneath her fingers. She had not meant to open it. The old estate on the outskirts of Blackridge had been abandoned for decades, the kind of place people warned about but never explained. Emily had only come inside to escape the storm, rain soaking through her thin jacket, her sneakers leaving wet prints across the cracked marble floor. The basement door had been unlocked. That was the first wrong thing. The second was the coffin, resting at the center of the room like it had been waiting. Dark wood, carved symbols she could not understand, and something inside it that felt like it was breathing without moving. Her fingers had slipped on the edge. A small cut, just a drop of blood. That was all it took. The symbols ignited beneath her touch, glowing a deep crimson that pulsed like a heartbeat. The air dropped in temperature so fast her breath turned visible. Then the lid moved. Not loudly, not violently, just enough to reveal darkness that felt too deep for the size of the box. Emily tried to pull her hand away, but something inside caught her wrist. Not tight, not painful, just enough to stop her. The contact sent a shock through her body, not electric, not physical, something older, something that knew her. Before continuing, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you cannot miss. The hand that held her was impossibly cold, yet her skin burned where it touched. Slowly, as if time itself had slowed to watch, a figure rose from within the coffin. Pale skin that looked untouched by sunlight for centuries. Dark hair falling across a face too perfect, too still. His eyes were closed at first, but the moment Emily tried to breathe, they opened. Not suddenly, not with panic, with awareness. Deep red, glowing faintly like embers buried under ash. He looked directly at her, not confused, not startled, but searching, as if confirming something he had been waiting for. Emily could not move. Her heartbeat was too loud. In her ears, too fast, like it was trying to escape her chest. The room around them seemed to bend, shadows stretching toward him like they recognized their master. When he spoke again, his voice was softer, but far more dangerous. "Who called me back?" It was not a question asked out of curiosity. It was a demand written into the bones of the world. Emily shook her head, her voice barely a whisper. "I did not. I swear, I did not mean to." But even as she said it, the symbol on the coffin flared brighter, and beneath her skin, something answered. The same mark began to burn across her palm, mirroring the ancient design carved into the wood. The Vampire King's gaze dropped to her hand. For the first time, something shifted in his expression. Not anger, not hunger, recognition. And that was far worse. The mark on Emily Carter's palm burned brighter, not like fire, but like something alive waking beneath her skin. She gasped and tried to pull her hand back, but the pain did not follow the rules of injury. It did not spread. It focused. A single point of heat that pulsed in rhythm with the ancient symbol carved into the coffin. Across from her, King Lucian Draven watched in complete stillness. The shadows in the chamber had stopped moving. The air itself seemed to wait for his reaction. Slowly, he released her wrist. The moment his skin left hers, Emily stumbled backward, nearly losing her balance on the cold stone floor. Her breath came fast, uneven, visible in the freezing air. She looked down at her palm, expecting blood, expecting a wound. Instead, she saw the symbol. Perfect, glowing faintly beneath her skin as if it had always been there, hidden, waiting. "That is not possible," Lucian said quietly. His voice carried no anger, but it carried weight, like a verdict spoken before trial. He stepped out of the coffin, his movements fluid and controlled, as if gravity itself had less hold on him. He was taller than she expected, his presence filling the space without effort. Every instinct in Emily's body screamed at her to run, but her legs refused to move. Not because he was holding her, because something inside her did not want to leave. Lucian's gaze shifted between her face and her hand, analyzing, calculating, remembering. That mark does not answer to chance, he continued. It answers to blood. Emily shook her head, her voice trembling. I do not know what you're talking about. I just came in to get out of the rain. I did not call you. I did not do anything. But even as she spoke, the symbol pulsed again, brighter this time. The room responded. The carved lines on the coffin ignited fully, light spreading outward like veins through the stone floor. A low sound filled the chamber, not loud, but deep, like something vast shifting far beneath the earth. Lucien's expression darkened slightly. Not fear, recognition of consequence. You already did, he said, and now they will feel it. As if summoned by his words, a distant vibration moved through the walls. Emily felt it through her feet first, then through her chest, like a second heartbeat that did not belong to her. Far beyond the abandoned estate, across the city, something had awakened. Lucien turned his head slightly, listening to something she could not hear. His eyes narrowed. They are coming. Emily's stomach dropped. Who is coming? He looked back at her, and for the first time, there was something unmistakable in his gaze. Not cruelty, not hunger, urgency. Those who would rather see you dead than understand what you are. The words hit harder than the cold. Emily took a step back, shaking her head. I am nothing. I am nobody. The symbol flared again, brighter than before, forcing her to gasp. Lucien closed the distance between them in a single smooth movement. Not threatening, not gentle, inevitable. He took her hand, turning her palm toward the dim light. His touch was still cold, but now it steadied her instead of freezing her. No, he said quietly. You are the reason I am standing here. The vibration grew stronger. This time, Emily heard it. Not a sound exactly, but a pressure like something approaching too fast to stop. The shadows along the walls began to stretch again, pulled toward the staircase leading out of the basement. Lucien released her hand and stepped slightly in front of her, positioning himself between her and the exit without looking back. The gesture was subtle, but absolute. A line drawn without words. Stay behind me, he said. Emily's voice shook. I do not understand what is happening. You will, he replied. If you survive. The next few minutes. The door at the top of the stairs slammed open with a force that shook dust from the ceiling. Footsteps followed. Not rushed, not chaotic, controlled, multiple, moving with purpose. Emily's heart pounded so hard she thought she might collapse. She could not see them yet, but she could feel them. Cold, focused, dangerous in a way that made Lucien seem almost calm by comparison. Lucien did not move. He did not prepare in any visible way. He simply stood there, watching the darkness above, his presence expanding until it filled the entire chamber. When he spoke again, his voice was no longer quiet. It carried through the stone like a command written into the foundation of the world. You are too late. The footsteps stopped. Silence followed. Then a voice from the darkness, sharp and controlled. My king, it said, with no warmth behind the title. You were never meant to wake. Emily's fingers trembled at her sides. She did not understand this world. She did not understand the mark burning in her skin. But she understood one thing with absolute clarity. Whatever had been sleeping in that coffin was not the most dangerous thing in this room anymore. The silence that followed pressed down on Emily Carter like a weight she could not escape. At the top of the stairs, the darkness shifted, and then they appeared. One by one, figures stepped into the faint light spilling down from the open doorway. Tall, still, dressed in dark coats that seemed to absorb what little warmth remained in the air. Their movements were too smooth, too precise, like predators that had learned patience over centuries. Emily counted without meaning to. 1, 2, 3, 5 in total. Each of them stopped at the edge of the staircase, forming a line as if an invisible boundary held them back from entering fully. Their eyes, pale and reflective, locked onto the figures standing below. King Lucien Draven did not move. He did not look back at Emily, but something in the air around him shifted, a pressure that expanded outward, cold and absolute. The shadows at his feet deepened, stretching toward the stairs like a living barrier. You cross my threshold without permission, Lucien said, his voice calm. but carrying a force that made the stone walls seem to listen. That was your first mistake. The figure at the center of the group stepped forward slightly. His face came into clearer view. Sharp features, silver eyes that reflected no light. He inclined his head just enough to acknowledge rank, but not enough to show respect. "We were summoned by the disturbance," he replied. "A seal broken. Power released. That grants us entry." His gaze shifted past Lucian for a fraction of a second, landing on Emily. The change in his expression was subtle, but unmistakable. Calculation. And now we see why. Emily's breath caught. She instinctively took a step backward, but her heel hit the edge of the coffin. The symbol on her palm pulsed again, brighter, reacting to their presence. The man's eyes sharpened. The human carries the mark. The others tensed, their focus narrowing entirely on her. Lucian moved then, not fast in a way that could be followed. One moment he stood still, the next he was closer to the base of the stairs, placing himself fully between Emily and the intruders. The temperature in the room dropped further. Frost began to form along the edges of the stone steps. "She is not yours to observe," Lucian said. "She is not yours to judge." The man's lips curved slightly, not into a smile, but something colder. "With respect, my king, she is exactly that. The seal that bound you is not meant to be broken. Not by a human. Not by anyone." He took another step down, testing the invisible line. The shadows at Lucian's feet surged forward, stopping just short of the intruder's boots. A warning without movement. "You will step back," Lucian said. This time, there was no softness in his voice. It was a command, the kind that expected obedience from the world itself. For a moment, the man hesitated. Then he did as told, retreating one step. Not submission. Strategy. "You may have returned," he said, "but the world you ruled is no longer yours. There are laws now. Councils. Balance." His eyes flicked again to Emily. "And she threatens all of it." Emily's chest tightened. "I did not do anything," she said, her voice shaking but louder than before. "I do not even know what this is." The mark on her palm flared in response to her words, sending a sharp pulse up her arm. Lucian's head tilted slightly, as if listening to something deeper than sound. Then he spoke, quieter but far more dangerous. "She does not need to understand it. Ido." He turned his head just enough for Emily to see the edge of his expression. There was something there now that had not been before. Not just recognition, decision. "Leave," he said to the figures on the stairs. "Before you force me to remind you what happens when you challenge a king who has nothing left to lose." The air went still again. The group at the top exchanged brief glances, silent communication passing between them. Finally, the leader straightened. "This is not over," he said. "The council will not ignore this, nor will they allow her to live freely." His gaze lingered on Emily one last time, as if memorizing her. Then, without another word, he turned. The others followed, disappearing into the darkness beyond the doorway. The sound of their footsteps faded, but the tension they left behind did not. Emily's knees nearly gave out as the pressure in the room lifted just enough for her to breathe. "Are they gone?" she asked, her voice barely steady. Lucian did not answer immediately. He remained facing the stairs, listening, calculating. Only after several long seconds did he turn back to her. His eyes were no longer just observing. They were resolved. "For now," he said. Then his gaze dropped to her hand again, where the mark still glowed faintly beneath her skin. "But everything is already changed." The chamber did not return to normal after they left. It only became quieter in a way that felt more dangerous. Emily Carter stood frozen beside the coffin, her breath slowly steadying, but the mark on her palm refused to fade. It pulsed faintly now, like an echo that had not decided to disappear. King Lucian Draven turned fully toward her, and for the first time since he awakened, his attention was no longer divided between threats and memory. It was entirely focused on her. "Show me your hand," he said. His voice was not harsh, but it allowed no hesitation. Emily swallowed, her fingers trembling as she lifted her hand toward him. The glow beneath her skin intensified the moment it came closer to him, reacting as if it recognized something deeper than sight. Lucian reached out, slower this time, as if aware that even the smallest movement carried weight. When his fingers closed gently around her wrist, the mark flared to life again. Not just light, but heat, a sharp pulse that forced Emily to gasp. At the same time, something shifted in Lucian. His expression changed, not visibly to anyone else, but Emily felt it. A flicker of something buried deep beneath centuries of control. His grip tightened for a fraction of a second before he released her abruptly, stepping back as if the contact had confirmed something he did not want to accept. "This cannot be coincidence," he said, more to himself than to her. Emily shook her head, trying to make sense of what was happening. "Then tell me what it is," she said, "because I do not understand any of this. I'm just trying to get home. I have a job. I have bills. This is not my life." The words sounded small the moment they left her mouth, swallowed by the cold stone and the presence standing in front of her. Lucian's gaze sharpened slightly. "Your life ended the moment you touched that coffin," he said quietly. The bluntness of it hit harder than any threat. Emily took a step back, her voice rising despite the fear pressing in on her chest. "No, that does not get to be true. You do not get to decide that for me." The mark on her palm flared again, stronger this time, as if reacting to her defiance. The light spread briefly up her wrist before settling back into the symbol. Lucian watched it closely, his eyes narrowing. "It responds to you," he said. "Not just your blood, your will." Emily looked down at her hand, her breathing uneven. "Then make it stop." Lucian did not answer immediately. Instead, he turned slightly, his gaze drifting to the coffin behind her. The carved symbols along its surface had dimmed, but they were not dormant. They waited. "That seal was created to hold me," he said slowly. "It required more than power. It required a bond, a specific bloodline tied to the one who placed it." He looked back at her. That bloodline no longer exists. It was erased centuries ago. Emily felt her stomach drop. "Then why is it on me?" Lucian stepped closer again, his presence filling the space between them. "Because something in you carries what should have been lost." The words settled heavily in the air. Emily shook her head again, but there was less certainty now. "That is not possible. I know my family. There is nothing special about us." Lucian's expression did not change, but his voice softened slightly, not in kindness, but in certainty. "You only know what you have been told." The mark pulsed once more, slower this time, as if agreeing. Emily pressed her hand against her chest, trying to steady herself. "Even if that is true, it does not explain why I woke you." "Why me?" Lucian's gaze held hers, unbroken. "Because you did not just wake me," he said. "You answered something that was waiting for you." The words sent a chill through her that had nothing to do with the cold. Before she could respond, the sound of distant thunder rolled above the estate, shaking loose dust from the ceiling. The storm outside had not passed. It had grown stronger. Lucian's attention shifted upward for a brief moment, listening again to things she could not hear. When he looked back at her, the decision in his eyes had hardened. "You cannot stay here," he said, "and you cannot go back to your life." Emily's chest tightened. "Then where am I supposed to go?" Lucian took a step toward the staircase, then paused just long enough to look at her over his shoulder. "With me," he said. It was not an offer. It was a conclusion. The mark on her palm flared one more time, brighter than before, as if sealing the choice she had never been given. The storm outside had grown into something violent, rain slamming against the broken windows above like it was trying to force its way inside. Emily Carter hesitated at the base of the stairs, her eyes fixed on King Lucian Draven's back as he began to ascend without waiting for her. Every instinct told her to run in the opposite direction, to get out of this place, to pretend none of this had happened. But the mark on her palm pulsed again, stronger than before, sending a wave of heat through her arm that stole her breath. It was not pain. It was direction. She did not understand it, but she felt it clearly. If she turned away from him now, something far worse would follow. "Wait," she said, her voice catching slightly as she forced herself to move. Her shoes echoed against the stone as she hurried after him, each step pulling her farther from the life she had known only hours ago. Lucien did not slow, but he did not leave her behind either. The distance between them remained exact, as if measured by something neither of them could see. When they reached the top of the stairs, the cold shifted. Not gone, but different. The main floor of the estate stretched out before them, dim and decaying, shadows clinging to the walls like they had settled there permanently. Broken furniture, dust thick enough to mark every step, and windows rattling under the force of the storm. Emily wrapped her arms around herself, trying to steady her breathing. "Where are we going?" she asked. Lucien paused near the center of the room, his gaze moving across the space with quiet calculation. "Somewhere they cannot reach you immediately," he said. "That is the only advantage we have left." Emily's chest tightened. "You keep saying they. Who are they really?" Lucien turned slightly, his eyes meeting hers again. "Those who govern what remains of my kind," he said. "Those who fear what you represent more than they fear me." The words settled heavily. Emily shook her head, frustration breaking through her fear. "I do not represent anything. I did not ask for this." The mark on her palm flared again, brighter, as if rejecting her denial. Lucien noticed. Of course he did. "Intent does not matter to power," he said. "Only consequence." A sudden crack of thunder shook the building, followed by a sound much closer, wood splintering somewhere above them. Emily flinched. That did not sound like the storm. Lucien's expression hardened. It was not. He moved toward the front of the estate, his steps silent despite the debris scattered across the floor. Emily followed, her heart pounding again, faster now, the sense of being hunted settling into her bones. When they reached the entry hall, the large front doors stood slightly open, pushed inward by the wind. Rain blew through the gap, scattering droplets across the floor. But it was not the storm that made Emily stop. It was the figures standing just beyond the threshold. Not the same ones from before. These were different. Fewer. Only two. But something about them felt heavier, more dangerous. They did not step inside. They did not need to. They stood in the rain as if it did. Not touch them. Their presence alone pressing against the boundaries of the house. One of them stepped forward just enough for the light to catch his face. Older. Calm. Eyes dark, as if they held no reflection at all. "You move quickly for someone who has been asleep for centuries," he said, his voice carrying easily through the storm. Lucien stopped a few feet from the doorway, his posture unchanged, but the air around him tightened again. "And you arrive uninvited for someone who still remembers how this ends," he replied. The man inclined his head slightly. "We remember very well," he said. His gaze shifted past Lucien, landing on Emily with unsettling precision. "Which is why we are here." Emily's breath hitched. The mark on her palm burned sharply, reacting to his attention like it recognized a threat before she could name it. The second figure beside him spoke, her voice quieter but no less controlled. "She should not exist," she said. That bloodline was erased. Lucien stepped forward half a pace, enough to block their view of Emily completely. "And yet she does," he said, "which makes your assumptions irrelevant." The older man's expression did not change, but something in the air shifted, like a decision being made. "No," he said calmly. "It makes her dangerous." The word hung in the air like a verdict. Emily felt it settle into her chest, heavy and suffocating. She had not chosen this. She had not wanted any of it. But standing there, between the storm and the ancient power that refused to release her, she understood something she could no longer deny. Whatever had awakened in that coffin had not come back alone. And whatever had awakened inside her was not going to let her go. The word dangerous did not fade when it was spoken. It stayed in the air, heavy and final, like something that could not be taken back. Emily Carter felt it settle into her chest, pressing against her lungs, making it harder to breathe. The rain outside intensified, each drop striking the ground with sharp, relentless force. But inside the estate, everything had gone still again. King Lucien Draven did not respond immediately. He stood between Emily and the two figures at the doorway, his presence unmoving, but the space around him had changed. It felt sharper now, like the edge of something waiting to be drawn. You came to pass judgment, Lucian said at last, his voice calm, but carrying a quiet authority that seemed to push against the storm itself. But you have not yet earned the right. The older man outside tilted his head slightly, studying him. We do not need to earn what is already ours, he replied. The seal was broken. The balance has shifted. That gives us authority. His gaze flicked briefly toward Emily again, and the mark on her palm reacted instantly, burning with a sudden intensity that forced her to clench her hand. The woman beside him stepped forward just enough for the edge of her silhouette to cross the threshold, though her foot did not touch the floor inside. She is the anomaly, she said. The disruption. If she remains, everything we have built fractures. Emily shook her head, her voice trembling but rising despite the fear. I am not a disruption. I'm a person. The moment the words left her mouth, the mark flared again, brighter than before, and something in the room responded. The air shifted, a low pressure building as if the house itself had recognized her claim. Lucian's head turned slightly, just enough to glance at her, and there was something new in his expression. Not surprise. Confirmation. You speak as if identity changes truth, the older man said. It does not. Lucian stepped forward one pace, enough to stand fully within the doorway's frame, placing himself directly between Emily and the rain-soaked figures. The storm did not touch him. The wind curved around him, as if unwilling to cross the line he represented. You speak of truth, Lucian said, his voice lowering, gaining weight. Yet you ignore the one truth that matters. She awakened me. The woman's eyes narrowed. That is exactly why she cannot be allowed to live freely. The tension snapped tighter. Emily felt it in her bones, a warning that something was about to break. Her heart pounded, but beneath it, something else began to rise. Not fear. Not exactly. Awareness. The mark on her palm pulsed again, slower this time, but deeper, sending a steady warmth through her arm that contrasted sharply with the cold surrounding her. Without thinking, she stepped forward. Just one step. It brought her closer to Lucian, closer to the doorway, closer to the figures who had already decided what she was. Lucian's head turned sharply, his voice cutting through the moment. Do not move. But she already had. The mark flared as she crossed the invisible boundary behind him, and the reaction was immediate. The air rippled outward from her like a silent shockwave. The two figures outside stiffened, their expressions shifting for the first time. Not fear, but something close to it. Recognition of something they had not expected. Emily did not understand what she had done, but she felt it. Something inside her had answered without permission. The older man's voice lost a fraction of its control. That is not possible. Lucian's gaze locked onto Emily, intense and searching, but this time there was no hesitation in it. Only certainty. It is now, he said quietly. The woman beside the older man stepped back half a pace, her composure cracking just enough to reveal the calculation behind it. If that power stabilizes, she said, her voice tighter now, she will not just be a threat. She will be a catalyst. The word hung between them, heavier than dangerous had been. Emily's chest rose and fell unevenly as she looked down at her hand. The mark no longer felt foreign. It felt present, active, alive in a way she could not explain. Lucian moved then, stepping forward just enough to reclaim the space between her and the doorway. But this time his hand closed around her wrist again, firm and deliberate. Not to restrain her, to ground her. Enough, he said, his voice carrying a finality that cut through the rising tension. You have seen what you came to see. The older man studied them both in silence for a long moment, his gaze moving between the mark, Emily, and Lucian. Then, slowly he straightened. Yes, he said, we have. His expression hardened again, control returning like a mask being put back into place. And now the council will act. The storm surged behind him, lightning splitting the sky, illuminating the figures for a brief second before darkness swallowed them again. Without another word, they turned and disappeared into the rain, leaving the doorway empty once more. But the silence they left behind was not relief. It was warning. Lucian did not release Emily's wrist immediately. His grip remained steady, his eyes fixed on her as if trying to read something deeper than the mark itself. "You should not have done that," he said quietly. Emily swallowed, her voice barely steady. "I did not mean to." Lucian's gaze did not soften. That is exactly the problem. The storm did not ease after they left. If anything, it grew heavier, pressing against the estate like the world itself was closing in. Emily Carter stood just inside the doorway, her hand still caught in King Lucian Draven's grip, the heat from the mark on her palm pulsing in slow, deliberate waves. It no longer felt like something foreign. It felt like something waking up. Lucian released her at last, but his gaze did not leave her face. It was sharper now, more focused than before, as if whatever uncertainty had existed in him had been replaced by something far more dangerous. "Look at me," he said. The command was quiet, but it carried weight that made it impossible to ignore. Emily lifted her eyes to his, her breath uneven. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The storm roared outside, thunder rolling across the sky, but inside, everything narrowed to that single exchange. Lucian studied her as if he was searching through layers she did not know she had. Then he spoke, and the words were not directed at her fear. They were directed at the truth behind it. "You did not just break the seal," he said. "You answered it." Emily frowned slightly, confusion cutting through the tension. "That does not make sense. I did not know it was there. I did not even know you existed." The mark on her palm pulsed again, as if reacting to the denial. Lucian's eyes flicked down to it, then back to her. "Exactly," he said. "You should not have known, and yet something in you did." He stepped closer, not threatening, but inevitable, closing the distance until she could feel the cold radiating from him again. "That seal was not designed to respond to curiosity," he continued. "It was designed to respond to a specific call, a specific presence." Emily shook her head, her voice tightening. "Then you are wrong, because I did not call anything." Lucian's expression did not change, but his voice lowered, gaining a quiet intensity that made the air feel heavier. "Then explain why it answered you." The question did not leave room for escape. Emily opened her mouth, then stopped, because she cannot answer it. The silence stretched between them, filled only by the sound of rain and distant thunder. Then, slowly, something shifted in Lucian's gaze. Not doubt, realization. "No," he said, almost to himself. "Not called." He stepped back slightly, as if the space between them had suddenly become necessary. "Recognized." The word landed differently. He looked at her again, more carefully this time, as if seeing her for the first time. "The seal did not wake because you broke it," he said. "It woke because it knew you." Emily felt a chill run through her that had nothing to do with the cold. "That is not possible," she whispered. "I have never been here before." Lucian's eyes darkened slightly. "Not you," he said. "Not exactly." The mark on her palm flared again, brighter than before, and this time the sensation did not stop at her skin. It moved deeper, sending a wave through her chest, her heartbeat stuttering for a fraction of a second before catching again. She gasped, pressing her hand against her sternum. "What is happening to me?" Lucian did not answer immediately. His gaze was fixed on her, but it was no longer just analyzing. It was remembering. "There is only one person who could place that seal," he said slowly. "Only one bloodline capable of binding me in that way." Emily shook her head again, but her voice was weaker now. "You said that bloodline was gone." Lucian stepped closer again, but this time there was no distance left between them. His voice dropped, almost a whisper, but it carried more weight than anything he had said before. "I was wrong." The words settled into the space between them, heavy and final. Emily's breath caught. "What does that mean?" Lucian's gaze did not waver. "It means you are not just connected to the seal," he said. "You are connected to the one who created it." The storm outside cracked again, lightning illuminating the room in a brief flash of white. For that single moment, Emily saw something in his expression she had not seen before. Not power, not control, something closer to disbelief. And if that is true, Lucien continued, his voice steady again, but lower. Then the question is no longer why you woke me. He paused, his eyes locking onto hers with a depth that made it impossible to look away. The question is who you were, before this life began. The mark on her palm pulsed once more, slow and deliberate, as if it had been waiting for that question all along. The question did not fade after he spoke it. It stayed between them, heavy and impossible to ignore. Who you were before this life began. Emily Carter felt the words settle deep inside her, pressing against something she did not understand, something that felt older than memory. That is not possible, she said again, but this time her voice lacked the certainty it once held. The mark on her palm pulsed in response, slower now, but stronger, as if it was listening. Lucien did not argue. He did not need to. He simply watched her, waiting, as if he knew the answer would not come from him. It would come from her. Emily shook her head, stepping back, her breath uneven. I'm Emily Carter. I grew up in a small apartment in Blackridge. I worked double shifts at a diner to keep the lights on. There is nothing before that. There is nothing else. The moment she said it, the mark flared sharply, a sudden burst of heat that forced her to gasp. The world around her shifted. Not physically, not completely, but enough that something slipped. For a fraction of a second, the room was not the same. The broken walls of the estate blurred, replaced by something older. Stone that was not cracked. Light that did not flicker. A different air. Colder. Deeper. Then it was gone. Emily staggered, grabbing onto the edge of a nearby table to steady herself. What was that? She whispered. Lucien had not moved, but his eyes had sharpened. You felt it, he said. Not a question. A confirmation. Emily nodded slowly, her heart racing. It was not this place. It felt like this place, but not like this. The mark pulsed again, softer now, as if encouraging the memory to surface. Lucien stepped closer, his voice lowering. The seal was not just a prison, he said. It was a memory, a moment locked in time. Emily looked at him, confusion mixing with something deeper, something closer to fear. Why would anyone lock a memory like that? Lucien's gaze did not waver, because it was the moment everything changed. The words sent a chill through her. Before she could respond, a sharp pain cut through her. Palm, not burning this time, pulling, like something inside the mark was trying to open. Emily cried out softly, clutching her hand, but the sensation only grew stronger. The room shifted again. This time, it lasted longer. The broken estate faded around her, replaced by towering stone walls lined with dark banners. Torches burned along the sides, their flames steady and unnatural. The air was colder, heavier, filled with a silence that carried weight. Emily stood in the center of a vast chamber, her heart pounding as she looked around. She was still herself. She could feel her body, her breath, her fear. But she was not alone. Across the chamber stood a figure. Tall, still, familiar in a way that made her chest tighten before she understood why. King Lucien Draven, not as he was now. Younger, not in years, but in presence. Less restrained, more dangerous. His eyes were not calm. They burned with something raw, something uncontained. And in front of him stood another woman. Human, dressed in dark fabric that moved like shadow around her. Her posture was steady, unafraid, even as she faced him. Emily could not see her face clearly, but she felt something the moment she looked at her. Recognition, not a memory. Of connection. The woman raised her hand, and in her palm, the same symbol burned. Bright, unbroken. The same mark now etched into Emily's skin. Lucien's voice echoed through the chamber, deeper, sharper than before. You think this will hold me? The woman did not step back. I know it will, she replied, her voice calm, steady, carrying a strength that did not need to be proven. Emily's chest tightened as she watched. The scene was not just something she was seeing. It was something she was feeling. The tension, the weight, the choice that had not yet been made. The mark in the woman's hand flared, and the symbols across the chamber walls ignited in response. Light spread outward, forming a pattern that surrounded Lucien completely. He moved fast, powerful, but the light held. Not through force, through something deeper, through a bond that refused to break. Emily's breath caught as the woman spoke again, her voice softer this time, but far more dangerous. "I'm not your enemy," she said, "but I will be your end if you force me to become it." The words echoed, and the world snapped back. Emily stumbled as the vision shattered, the broken estate rushing back into place around her. The storm roared outside once more, but it felt distant compared to what she had just seen. Her chest rose and fell rapidly as she looked down at her hand. The mark was still there, still glowing, but now it felt different, not just alive, remembering. Lucian stood in front of her, closer than before, his gaze locked onto hers with an intensity that left no room for denial. "You saw her," he said quietly. Emily's voice trembled as she answered. "I felt her." The silence that followed was heavier than anything that had come before. Lucian's expression did not change, but something in his presence shifted again. Not power, not control, something far more dangerous. Certainty. "Then everything they fear is true," he said. Emily swallowed, her heart still racing. "What do they fear?" Lucian's eyes did not leave hers. "That you are not just connected to her," he said. "You are her," returned. The words did not feel like a revelation. They felt like a fracture. "You are her," returned. Emily Carter stood frozen, her breath caught somewhere between disbelief and something far more dangerous. The storm outside continued to rage, but sounded distant now, like it belonged to a different world. "No," she said, the word coming out softer than she intended. "That is not possible. I am not someone else. I am me." The mark on her palm pulsed again, slow and deliberate, as if it disagreed. Lucian did not move. His gaze remained fixed on her, unyielding, searching deeper than her words. "You are Emily Carter," he said quietly. "But that does not mean you have always been only that." Emily shook her head, stepping back again, her chest tightening. "You are asking me to believe that I lived another life, that I stood in front of you like that I sealed you away." Her voice rose slightly, emotion breaking through. "I would remember that." Lucian's expression darkened, not in anger, but in something heavier. "Memory is not the same as truth," he said. "There are ways to bury it, to protect it, or to erase it entirely." Emily's hand tightened into a fist, but the mark burned through it, refusing to be hidden. "Why would anyone erase something like that?" she demanded. Lucian's gaze flickered for a brief moment, as if something old had been touched. "Because some choices are too heavy to live with," he said. The answer did not bring comfort. It brought something worse. Silence stretched between them, thick and suffocating. Then Emily's voice broke through again, quieter now. "If I am her," she said slowly, "then what does that make you?" The question shifted something in the air. Lucian's posture stilled completely, his expression tightening in a way that suggested control, not ease. "That," he said after a moment, "is a far more complicated answer." Emily took a step forward this time, not away. Toward him, toward the truth she could not escape. "Then say it," she insisted. The mark on her palm flared again, brighter than before, as if pushing the moment forward. Lucian's eyes dropped briefly to her hand, then rose back to meet hers. "She was the only one who ever stood against me and did not fall," he said. "The only one who understood what I was and chose not to destroy me when she had the chance." Emily's breath caught. "But she sealed you." "Yes," Lucian said. "She chose to stop me instead." The weight of that choice settled heavily between them. Emily's voice lowered, almost a whisper. "Why?" Lucian did not answer immediately. His gaze shifted slightly, not away from her, but inward, as if he was looking at something far beyond the present moment. "Because she believed I could become something else," he said finally. "And because she knew that if I did not, no one else would be able to stop me." The storm cracked loudly above them, thunder rolling through the estate like a warning. Emily felt her heart tighten. "And did you," she asked, "become something else?" Lucian's expression did not change, but the silence that followed was answer enough. The mark on her palm pulsed again, slower now, almost steady, as if syncing with something deeper. Emily looked down at it, her voice barely steady. If I am her, she said, then why did I wake you? The question lingered, heavier than the others. Lucian stepped closer again, but this time there was something different in the space between them. Not just tension, not just power, something closer to inevitability. That is what they fear, he said. Not that you remember who you were, but that you will make the same choice again. Emily's chest tightened. And what choice is that? Lucian's gaze locked onto hers, unwavering. To stand in front of me, he said, and decide whether I deserve to exist. The words settled into the air, like a final judgment waiting to be spoken. Emily felt the weight of it press against her, heavier than anything she had known before. She had come into this place, trying to escape the rain. Now she stood at the center of something far older, far more dangerous, and somehow it was waiting for her to decide its ending. The mark on her palm pulsed again, steady now, like a heartbeat that was not entirely her own. And for the first time, Emily did not try to deny it. She simply whispered, her voice quiet but no longer uncertain. Then maybe I need to understand what you were before I decide what you are. Lucian did not look away. Then you will see everything, he said. And something in his voice suggested that once she did, there would be no turning back. The words settled into the space between them like a promise that could not be undone. Then you will see everything. Emily Carter felt the weight of it press against her chest, heavy and inevitable. She did not step back this time. She did not look away. The mark on her palm pulsed steadily, no longer erratic, no longer resisting. It felt aligned, as if it had been waiting for this exact moment. Show me, she said, her voice quiet but firm. Lucian Draven did not hesitate. He reached for her hand again, but this time there was no sudden shock, no uncontrolled reaction. When his fingers closed around hers, the connection felt different, intentional, controlled. The moment their skin touched, the mark flared to life, brighter than it had ever been. The world shifted instantly. There was no gradual change this time. No bleh, no warning. The estate vanished, replaced by a vast open courtyard surrounded by towering stone walls. Torches burned along the perimeter, their flames steady despite the cold wind that moved through the space. The ground beneath Emily's feet was solid, ancient stone, worn smooth by time and footsteps that no longer existed. She could feel the air, the weight of it, the silence that carried expectation. She was not just watching. She was there. Across the courtyard stood Lucian, but not the one beside her. This version of him was unrestrained, his presence overwhelming, his power visible in the way the air around him seemed to bend. His eyes burned brighter, not controlled, not hidden. Around him stood others, figures dressed in dark armor, their posture rigid, their attention fixed on the center of the courtyard. And there, standing opposite him, was the woman. The same woman Emily had seen before. The same mark glowing in her palm, steady and unwavering. But this time, Emily saw her clearly. Her face, her eyes, her expression. And the moment she did, something inside her stopped. It was not recognition in the way she understood it. It was deeper. It was certainty. The woman looked exactly like her. Not similar. Not close. The same eyes. The same features. The same presence, but stronger, sharper, as if shaped by a life that demanded more. Emily's breath caught as the realization settled into her. She was not just connected to this woman. She was looking at herself. The memory moved forward without pause. Lucian stepped closer in the courtyard, his voice carrying across the space with authority that demanded attention. You cannot bind me, he said. You do not understand what you are challenging. The woman did not move. She stood her ground, her gaze steady, her voice calm in a way that made it more powerful than his. I understand exactly what I am challenging, she replied. And I understand what happens if I do nothing. The figures around them shifted slightly, tension building, but no one intervened. This was not a battle for them. This was something else. Something personal. Lucian's expression hardened, but there was something beneath it. Not anger. Something closer to frustration. You believe you can control this, he said. You believe you can control me. The woman's hand tightened slightly, the mark in her palm glowing brighter. No, she said. I believe I can stop you. The air changed instantly. The symbols along the courtyard walls ignited, lights spreading outward in precise patterns, forming a structure that began to close around Lucien. He moved, fast, powerful, but the light responded faster, adjusting, tightening, adapting to every motion. It was not just power holding him. It was intention. It was knowledge of exactly what he was capable of. Emily felt the weight of it, the precision, the certainty behind every movement. This was not fear driving the woman. It was resolve. Lucien stopped suddenly, his gaze locking onto hers, something shifting in his expression for the first time. You will regret this, he said, but the words lacked the certainty they once held. The woman stepped closer, just one step, bringing herself within reach of him despite the power surrounding them. No, she said quietly. I will regret it if I do not. The mark flared brighter, the lights surged, and the structure completed. The seal locked into place. The courtyard fell silent. Lucien stood within it, contained, his power pressed inward, controlled but not destroyed. The woman lowered her hands slowly, her breathing steady, but her eyes did not leave his. I did not choose this because I wanted to win, she said. I chose this because I needed you to survive what you are becoming. The words lingered, heavier than the magic itself. The memory fractured. The courtyard shattered into fragments of light, dissolving around Emily as the present rushed back in. The storm returned. The broken estate. The cold air. Emily staggered slightly, her hand still held in Lucien's, her chest rising and falling rapidly. She looked at him, her voice barely more than a whisper. She did not hate you. Lucien's expression remained controlled, but something in his eyes had changed. Something quieter. Something deeper. No, he said. She did not. Emily swallowed, the truth settling into her with a weight she could not ignore. Then why does it feel like I remember losing you? The mark pulsed once more, steady and alive, as if it had been waiting for her to say it out loud. The words lingered in the air long after she spoke them. It feels like I remember losing you. Emily Carter did not understand why she said it, only that it felt true in a way that went deeper than thought. The mark on her palm pulsed once, slow and steady, as if confirming something she had not yet accepted. King Lucien Draven did not answer immediately. For the first time since she had seen him awaken, there was a pause in him that was not calculation, not control. Something quieter, something almost human. His gaze did not leave hers, but it shifted, not looking at who she was now, but through her, into something far older. Because you did, he said at last. The words were simple, final. Emily's breath caught, her chest tightening as if the air itself had grown heavier. No, she whispered, but there was no force behind it. Only fear. That is not possible. Lucien stepped closer, but there was no threat in the movement. Only inevitability. You saw the moment I was sealed, he said. But that was not the end of it. The mark on her palm flared slightly, responding to his voice, to the truth behind it. Emily shook her head, tried to ground herself, trying to hold onto something familiar. Then show me, she said, her voice trembling but determined. If this is real, then show me what happened after. Lucien studied her for a long moment, as if weighing something unseen. Then, without another word, he reached for her hand again. The moment their skin touched, the mark ignited, brighter than before, and the world shifted once more. This time, the transition was heavier, slower, as if whatever memory they were entering resisted being seen. The cold returned first, then the silence. Emily found herself standing in the same chamber she had seen before, but it was no longer filled with tension. It was empty. The torches along the walls burned low, their light dim and fading. The symbols that had once glowed across the stone were dark now, dormant, their purpose fulfilled. At the center of the chamber stood the sealed structure, the same one she had seen form around Lucien. But it was different now. Still, quiet, final. Emily stepped forward slowly, her breath catching as she approached. She could feel it, the absence of movement, the absence of life, but not the absence of presence. He was still there, She knew it without seeing him. Behind her, footsteps echoed softly. She turned. The woman stood there again. The same woman. The same face. Her face. But she was different now. Her posture was no longer steady. It was strained, as if something inside her was barely holding together. Her hand, the one that bore the mark, trembled slightly at her side. Emily felt the shift instantly. This was not the moment of power. This was the moment after. The cost. The woman took a slow step toward the sealed structure, her eyes fixed on it with a weight that Emily could feel in her own chest. "It is done," a voice said from the shadows. Figures emerged from the edges of the chamber, the same armored presence as before, watching, waiting. One of them stepped forward, his tone controlled, but carrying something beneath it. "You have fulfilled your duty." The woman did not look at him. "No," she said quietly. "I have only delayed what comes next." Her voice carried no victory, no relief, only certainty. Emily's chest tightened as she watched, as she felt the emotion behind the words like it belonged to her. The man stepped closer, his expression unreadable. "The council will ensure the seal holds," he said. "You have done enough." The woman finally turned, her gaze sharp despite the exhaustion behind it. "You do not understand what he is," she said, "or what he could become." The man's expression did not change. "That is why he is contained." Silence followed, heavy, unresolved. The woman looked back at the sealed structure, her hands slowly rising, hovering just inches from its surface. She did not touch it, but the mark in her palm began to glow again, softer this time, almost like a heartbeat fading. Emily felt it in her own hand, the same rhythm, the same pull. The woman's voice dropped, barely above a whisper. "I did not do this to destroy him." The chamber seemed to hold its breath. "I did this because I believed he could still choose something different." Her hand trembled slightly, and for a moment, it seemed like she might reach out, might break her own seal. But she did not. Instead, she closed her hand slowly, the light dimming as her fingers curled inward. "And if I am wrong," she continued, her voice tightening just enough to reveal the truth beneath it, "then I will be the one who returns to end what I could not finish." The words settled into the chamber like a vow, a promise that time could not erase. Emily felt it echo through her, deep and unshakable. The memory fractured. The chamber dissolved, the cold fading as the present rushed back and around her. The storm returned. The broken estate. The sound of rain against glass. Emily staggered slightly, her hand still in Lucien's, her breath uneven. She looked up at him, her eyes searching, no longer denying what she felt. "She knew," she said, quietly. "She knew she might have to come back." Lucien's gaze did not soften, but something in it shifted again. Not surprise, not doubt, acceptance. "Yes," he said. Emily swallowed, her voice barely steady. "Then why does it feel like she did not want to leave you?" The mark pulsed again, slow and heavy, as if it already knew the answer. The question lingered between them like something fragile that neither of them could afford to break. "Why does it feel like she did not want to leave you?" Emily Carter felt the weight of it settle deep in her chest, heavier than the storm, heavier than the mark burning in her palm. For a long moment, King Lucien Draven did not answer. His gaze remained fixed on her, but something behind it had shifted again. Not power, not control, something quieter, something that had survived centuries of silence and refused to fade. "Because she did not," he said at last. The words were soft, but they carried more weight than anything he had said before. Emily's breath caught, her heart tightening as if the truth had reached something inside her that had been waiting to be named. "Then why did she leave you like that?" she asked, her voice barely steady. Lucien stepped back slightly, not creating distance, but giving the moment space. His gaze drifted past her for a fraction of a second, as if he was looking at something that no longer existed in this world. "Because staying would have destroyed everything," he said. Emily shook her head slowly. "That does not make sense. If she believed in you, then why seal you away?" The mark on her palm pulsed again, stronger this time, and something in the air responded. The room grew quieter, the storm outside dimming as if the world itself was listening. Lucien's eyes returned to hers, sharper now, but not colder. Belief does not erase truth, he said. She saw what I was becoming, and she understood that if I continued, there would be nothing left of the part of me she believed in. Emily felt the words settle into her, heavy and undeniable. So she chose to lose you, she whispered. Lucien did not correct her. She chose to stop me, he said, and she chose to carry the consequence of that choice. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of something unspoken. Emily looked down at her hand, at the mark that still pulsed beneath her skin, and for the first time, it did not feel like a burden. It felt like a memory she had not yet fully remembered. I can feel her, she said quietly. Not like a voice, not like a thought, just something that does not go away. Lucien watched her carefully. That is because she is not gone, he said. Emily lifted her eyes again, confusion and something deeper mixing together. Then what am I? The question was no longer denial. It was acceptance of something she could not fully understand. Lucien stepped closer again, his presence steady, grounding in a way that felt almost contradictory to everything he represented. You are what remains, he said, and what returns when it is needed. The mark flared again, brighter than before, and this time the sensation did not stop at her hand. It spread through her chest, her heartbeat sinking with it, steady and deliberate. Emily inhaled sharply, her eyes widening slightly. Needed for what? Lucien did not answer immediately. Instead, he reached out, not to take her hand this time, but to rest his fingers lightly against the edge of the mark. The contact was different now. Not cold, not burning, balanced. The moment his skin touched hers, the mark reacted, not with pain, but with clarity. The room shifted again, but not into a memory, into something quieter, a feeling, a presence that was not tied to a single moment in time. Emily felt it around her, within her, a quiet certainty that carried both strength and sorrow. A choice that had been made before, and might have to be made again. Lucien's voice lowered, almost a whisper, but it carried a truth that could not be denied. For the moment when the same decision returns, he said. Emily's chest tightened. And if I do not make the same choice? Lucien's gaze did not waver. Then everything she sacrificed will mean nothing. The words settled heavily between them, leaving no room for comfort. Emily swallowed, her heart pounding, but beneath it, something else began to form. Not fear, not uncertainty, resolve. The mark pulsed again, steady, aligned with that feeling, as if it recognized it. She looked at him, her voice quiet but no longer fragile. Then I need to understand everything, before I decide anything. Lucien studied her for a long moment, as if measuring something deeper than her words. Then, slowly he nodded once. You will, he said. The storm outside cracked again, louder this time, lightning flashing through the broken windows, illuminating the room in sharp, fleeting light. For a brief second, everything stood still. Then Emily felt it. A shift, not inside her, outside. The mark on her palm flared suddenly, violently, no longer steady, no longer calm. A warning. Lucien's head turned instantly, his expression hardening as his attention snapped toward the darkness beyond the estate. They are not waiting anymore, he said. Emily's breath caught. Who? Lucien's voice dropped, colder now, sharper. Everyone. The word echoed through the space like the beginning of something that could no longer be stopped. The word everyone did not echo. It settled. Heavy. Final. Emily Carter felt the mark in her palm burn with a sharp intensity that no longer felt like a warning. It felt like a countdown. The storm outside surged, no longer just weather, but movement, presence, dozens, maybe more, surrounding the estate, closing in. She could feel them now the same way Lucien could. Cold, focused, united by one purpose. In this, Lucien stepped forward, placing himself between her and the open doorway once more. But this time, there was no illusion of control in the situation. His posture was not defensive. It was absolute. They will not negotiate, he said quietly. Emily's chest tightened. Because of me. Lucien did not answer, but he did not deny it. The mark flared again, brighter, spreading heat through her arm, her chest, her heartbeat syncing with it until it became impossible to tell where she ended and it began. Emily closed her eyes for a brief second, grounding herself in the only thing that still felt certain. The choice. Not the past. Not the fear. The choice. When she opened her eyes again, something in her had shifted. Not dramatically. Not violently. But enough. Enough that the fear no longer controlled her. If they are here because of what I am, she said, her voice steady for the first time, then running will not change anything. Lucien turned his head slightly, his gaze sharp, searching her face. This is not a fight, you understand. Then I need to understand it now, she replied. The mark pulsed again, not violently this time, but in agreement. Lucien studied her for a long moment, and in that silence, something passed between them that words could not carry. Recognition, not of who she was, but of what she had chosen. Finally, he stepped aside. Not completely, never completely, but enough. Enough to show that the decision was no longer his alone. The front doors creaked open wider under the force of the wind. Rain swept across the floor as the figures outside came into view. Not two, not five, dozens, lined across the grounds, their presence forming a wall of cold intent. The older man stepped forward again, his expression unchanged, but his eyes sharper now. It ends here, he said. Emily stepped forward before Lucien could respond. Just one step. The mark in her palm ignited, light spreading outward, not uncontrolled, not explosive, but precise. The air around her shifted, the same way it had in the memory, the same structure beginning to form, invisible at first, then undeniable. The council figures stilled, not in fear, in recognition. You see it, Emily said, her voice calm, carrying further than it should have. You felt it when I stepped forward before. This is what you are afraid of. The older man's gaze hardened. We are afraid of what you could become. Emily shook her head slightly. No, you are afraid of what I might choose. The words landed. Heavy. True. The mark pulsed again, brighter, the air tightening as the structure of power built around her, not as a prison, but as a boundary. A decision taking shape. Lucien did not move behind her. He did not speak. He simply watched, waiting, the same way he had centuries ago. Emily took another step forward, now standing at the threshold, between two worlds that refused to coexist. I remember enough, she said quietly. Not everything, but enough. Her gaze lifted, meeting the eyes of the council, then shifting briefly to Lucien. She did not seal you because she hated you, she continued. She did it because she believed you could choose something better. The mark flared, the light stabilizing, no longer erratic, no longer uncertain. Controlled, aligned, and now I have to decide if she was right. Silence fell. Even the storm seemed to pause. The older man stepped forward one final time. Then decide, he said. Emily closed her eyes for a brief moment, feeling the weight of both lives settle into one. The past, the present, the fear, the belief. Then she opened them again. Clear, certain. She turned slightly, just enough to look at Lucien. You said she believed you could become something else, she said. Lucien held her gaze, unflinching. Yes. Emily nodded once. Then she turned back to the council, her voice steady, unwavering. Then I will not seal him again. The reaction was immediate. Tension snapped, power shifting across the line of figures. But Emily did not move. The mark burned brighter, the structure around her holding, not as a cage, but as a command. I will stand here, she said, and if he becomes what you fear, I will be the one who ends it. The words carried the same weight as the vow from centuries ago. Not a promise of control, a promise of responsibility. The older man studied her, long and silent. Then, slowly, something in his expression shifted. Not acceptance, but acknowledgement. He stepped back. One step, then another. The others followed. Not defeated, not convinced, but stopped. For now, the storm did not fade, but it no longer pressed inward. The line had been drawn, the decision made. Emily's breath left her slowly as the mark on her palm dimmed, settling into a steady glow. Behind her, Lucian stepped forward, stopping just beside her, not in front, not behind. Beside. You chose differently, he said quietly. Emily did not look away from the darkness ahead. No, she replied. I chose the same thing. The silence that followed was not empty. It was complete, and for the first time, the future was no longer something waiting to happen. It was something they would face together,